I'm not the kind of man who ever thought he'd end up in a story like this. I've always believed in building, not destroying. In my mind, a man should have his house in order before he starts one with someone else. And I did. I was 38, financially solid, had my own home, my own truck, and a steady position as a project manager for a construction company in Dallas. I had no interest in games or flings. I wanted a woman I could build with. When I met Laura, she seemed to fit. She was beautiful in a subtle, classy way, worked as an office assistant in an insurance firm, and carried herself with confidence. I respected that. We dated for about a year before getting married. The first couple of years were good. Not perfect, but solid. She laughed at my dry humor. I appreciated her sharp mind, and we didn't have the screaming matches you hear about in other marriages. But over time, things shifted. Not suddenly, slowly, like the way rust creeps into metal. She started pulling away physically, offering excuses here and there. I'm tired, I have a headache, I'm stressed. At first, I brushed it off. I wasn't going to badger her like some needy teenager. I thought maybe it was work pressure or just a phase. But the phase never ended. Months turned into years where I'd have to initiate most of our intimacy, and more often than not, I was turned down. And when it did happen, it felt mechanical, like a chore she was checking off a list. Now, I'm a man who values respect above all else. You can love someone, but without respect, the foundation cracks. And over time, I started feeling like she didn't see me as a man anymore, more like a roommate who paid the bills. Still, I didn't cheat. I didn't run to bars. I kept my discipline. I woke up early, hit the gym, worked long hours, and came home to a house I provided for. I was the man who fixed the sink, mowed the lawn, handled the taxes, and made sure we never once got a late notice on a bill. That's how I was raised. A man handles his responsibilities. Then came that night. It was a Thursday. I'd had a brutal day at work, dealing with a supplier who delivered the wrong materials and a client breathing down my neck about a project deadline. I came home around 7:30 p.m., bone tired, but looking forward to the weekend. Laura was in the living room scrolling through her phone, feet up on the coffee table, glass of wine half empty. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. She glanced up. "Hey, dinner's in the fridge. I already ate." No kiss. "No, how was your day?" Just that. I microwaved the plate, ate in silence, and later, when we were both in the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and reached for her hand. "You know," I said quietly, "we haven't been close in a while. I miss us. I miss that part of us." She looked at me like I'd just interrupted something important. Then, without a hint of shame or hesitation, she said, "No, thanks. I already did it today at work. I swear, I thought I'd misheard her." I asked what. She repeated it. Same flat tone, same shrug, like it was nothing worth hiding. I just sat there. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get in her face. I didn't beg for an explanation. I looked at her, and in that moment, I felt something shut off inside me. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even anger yet. It was clarity. She had just told me, with her own mouth, that she had been with someone else. And not only did she not care that I knew, she thought it was something she could throw at me casually. I didn't lash out. That's not who I am. A man who knows his worth doesn't waste energy fighting for someone who's already left the table. I just looked at her, nodded once, and got up. She said, "What? You're not going to say anything?" I said, "No. You've said enough." That was the last thing I spoke to her that night. I lay down on my side of the bed, closed my eyes, and felt my mind go into a different gear, the one I use when a job goes south on a construction site. You don't panic. You assess, plan, and act. Because here's the thing. A man who respects himself doesn't beg for scraps. And I wasn't about to start now. That night, after she said those words, I didn't argue. I didn't slam doors or storm out. I just let her think I was retreating into silence because I was hurt. In reality, I was shifting into a different mode entirely. The one I use when I need to get a project back on track at work. Stay calm, collect information, and don't let anyone know what you're doing. I knew one thing. I wasn't going to confront her without evidence. Words can be twisted, denied, spun into I was just joking or you misunderstood me. But when you have proof, there's no room for that. The next morning, I got up early, went to the gym like I always do, and kept my routine exactly the same. A predictable man is an underestimated man, and that's an advantage. She'd never suspect I was already planning my exit. On my way to work, I made my first call to a buddy of mine, Chris, who runs a small private security firm. We've worked together on job sites before, and I know he doesn't ask unnecessary questions. I told him I needed help retrieving some phone records and possibly setting up discreet surveillance. He told me to come by his office after work. At lunch, I started pulling our joint bank account statements online. I wasn't looking for hotel charges. She was smarter than that. But I did see something else. Multiple charges from restaurants near her office during lunch hours, often on days she claimed she skipped lunch. I made note of every single one. Chris set me up with a small GPS tracker, perfectly legal for a spouse to place on a jointly owned vehicle in Texas. I slipped it in her car that evening when she was inside on a phone call. She didn't even glance out the window. The next 2 weeks were a lesson in patience. I didn't push her. I didn't mention intimacy. I didn't even bring up the comment she made that night. Instead, I gave her space, which she filled with more work late, excuses, and girls' nights she didn't bother to invite me to. The tracker showed her stopping at the same office building multiple times after hours, not her own. On my third week of watching, I got what I needed. Chris called me one evening and said, "Got her on camera walking into the Hilton with a guy. Not a co-worker I've seen before." He sent me the time-stamped footage. No grainy shadows, no doubt about who it was. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I met with a divorce attorney recommended by a client. I told him everything, and he laid it out plainly. In Texas, adultery can affect the division of property. Any joint credit accounts can be frozen or limited before proceedings. I should start moving my separate property, the things I owned before marriage, into a secure location. That same week, I took the firearms my father had left me and moved them to my brother's house. I had the title to my truck locked in my office safe. I also set up a new checking account in my name only, transferring a portion of my paycheck there each week. All of it completely within my legal rights. At home, I kept my expression neutral. She complained about traffic, about a coworker, about how busy she was. I nod, maybe give a short reply, then go back to whatever I was doing. My emotional investment was already gone. The small things started standing out. She stopped cooking dinner entirely, said it was too much after a long day. She bought new lingerie but never wore it around me. She changed her phone password, something she hadn't done in years. All of it just confirmed what I already knew. The day I knew I was ready was the day I watched her come home, toss her purse on the couch, and head straight to the shower without a word. I'd seen the GPS ping at that same office building earlier, and I didn't even need to check the footage to know. I remember sitting there, watching the steam roll out of the bathroom door, and thinking, she has no idea the game is already over. From that point on, it wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about positioning myself so when I made my move, it would be clean, legal, and final. No second chances, no drawn-out working on it. That's why I kept playing the role, the calm, predictable husband. Because the element of surprise is worth more than any confrontation. When you drop the hammer, you want it to be the first time they realize the floor is gone under them. By the time the fourth week rolled around, I had video proof of her with another man, GPS logs of her repeated trips to his location, financial records showing unusual spending patterns, a lawyer ready to file, my personal assets secured, a separate account with 3 months' expenses already saved. She thought she was living 2 lives, one with me, one with him. What she didn't know was that mine had already split from hers entirely. I was living for myself now, and I wasn't going to tell her a thing until the exact moment it would hurt the most. I had everything I needed. Evidence, legal positioning, my assets safe, my mind clear. Now it was just about timing. The thing about timing is, if you do it too soon, you give them a chance to react, spin a story, or cry their way into sympathy. If you wait too long, you risk looking like you tolerated the disrespect. I wanted it to be decisive, the kind of move that leaves no cracks for her to wedge herself back in. The opportunity came on a Monday morning. Laura was getting ready for work, moving around the bedroom in a hurry, complaining about how she had so much to do this week. I already knew where she was really going at lunch. The GPS tracker showed her pattern was predictable now. My lawyer had all the paperwork prepared. Divorce petition citing adultery, a list of my separate property, and a request for a disproportionate division of marital assets based on fault. In Texas, that's legal when one spouse has been unfaithful. All I had to do was sign, and the process would start. I didn't want to serve her in the kitchen or the living room. No, I wanted it to happen somewhere that would make it clear she couldn't control the environment. Somewhere she'd have no way to retreat into a comfort zone. So, I called her office that morning pretending to be a courier and arranged to deliver an urgent envelope directly to her at work. That envelope would be the divorce papers, along with a neatly printed packet of GPS logs, credit card statements, and photos of her walking into that Hilton. Before I left the house, I took my last quiet walk through. The things that were mine before the marriage were already gone. My clothes were minimal here now. The safe was empty. Even the framed photo of my late father from the living room had been moved to my brother's. I didn't leave gaps big enough for her to notice immediately, just enough that when she finally realized, she'd see the whole picture. I stopped by my bank on the way to her office and closed the joint checking account, transferring my half into my private one. The joint credit card was already frozen from last week. Every move was within the law. My lawyer had been meticulous about that. When I arrived at her building, I signed into the front desk as a courier, just like I'd said on the phone. The receptionist called her down, and I waited in the lobby, holding the envelope. She walked out a minute later, wearing that same fitted blazer I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, half smiling. I handed her the envelope. "This is for you." She frowned, took it, and started to open it right there. I didn't wait for her to finish. I turned, walked out the glass doors, and didn't look back. By the time I got to my truck, my phone was buzzing. First call, second call, then texts. "What is this? We need to talk. You can't just do this without warning." I didn't answer. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to sit with the silence. That evening, I stayed at a hotel near my office. I knew she'd go home, open drawers, and start realizing what was missing. She'd see the bank accounts frozen, the credit card declined, the absence of my personal things. She'd call friends to tell her side of the story, but they'd already be hearing the truth from me. Before leaving the hotel, I'd sent a short, factual email to her parents, my family, and our closest mutual friends. Laura and I are separating. This was my decision after discovering her infidelity. I have documented proof. Please respect my privacy during this process. No emotion, no insults, just facts. The next day, my lawyer called to say she had already contacted an attorney of her own, and from the tone of their questions, she was rattled. The evidence left her no room to play victim. The law was on my side, and she knew it. Over the following weeks, I stuck to my plan. No direct contact except through lawyers. No public rants on social media. No late-night answers to emotional texts. She tried everything. Anger, guilt trips, even nostalgia. She sent old photos of us on vacations. She wrote, "Can't we at least talk? We used to be friends." I read each one without replying. The divorce moved quickly, less than 3 months. The final decree awarded me the house, my truck, my separate property, and a larger share of the joint savings. She kept her car and a small settlement, but it was a fraction of what she'd have gotten if she hadn't been caught cheating. When the papers were signed, I walked out of the courthouse and didn't look back. No handshake, no parting words. Just a quiet drive to my brother's house to pick up the last of my things. The months that followed were light. I didn't realize how much mental weight I'd been carrying until it was gone. I stopped checking my phone, expecting excuses. I stopped wondering if she'd be in the mood this week. I stopped having to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. I started running again in the mornings, hitting the gym harder, cooking my own dinners without worrying if someone else liked the menu. I booked a solo trip to Montana, just to hike and clear my head. And here's the part one didn't expect. I didn't feel bitterness. I wasn't replaying the moment she said, "No thanks, I already did it today at work." I wasn't fantasizing about revenge anymore. I'd already delivered the only revenge that mattered, walking away with my dignity, my assets, and my life intact. People think strength is in the confrontation. It's not. Strength is in the exit, the calm, deliberate, final exit. Because once you reach the point where you know your worth, you stop trying to convince someone else to see it. Laura tried a few more times in the months after the divorce. A call on my birthday, a text on Thanksgiving, a Merry Christmas with a smiley face. I never replied. I was already gone. And a man who's gone in his mind never goes back.